The views, comments, stories, and opinions shared within this podcast are our own, or those of our guests, and in no way represent the views of the companies, associations, or organizations that any of us may work for. All stories, events, or tales shared within this episode may or may not have happened in the manner in which they are told. They may or may not have even happened at all. The details have been changed to protect the innocent and the guilty alike. This is Squawk Ident. You're listening to Squawk Ident. Together, we will explore the many pathways to an aviation profession, the challenges that a professional aviator can expect in today's marketplace, and we share many stories along the way. I'm your host, Aviator Tony, a professional airline pilot currently flying for a U.S. legacy airline with close to 20 years on the flight line. This is episode 72 of Squawk Ident. What day is it? Recorded on the 9th of March, 2021. From the Aviator Sound Studios from somewhere in Southern California. On today's episode, Captain Roger and I discussed the challenges of ever-changing and demanding flight schedules, the backside of the clock flying, and Captain Roger schools Aviator Tony on VOR Alpha and Localizer Delta approach plates. Isn't it fun to make fun of the airline pilot? Now that our pre-flight is complete, let's get ready to push off the gate. Start up our virtual podcast engines and get ready for takeoff. Squawk Ident episode 72 is officially underway. Here to help me to get flight 72 of the Squawk Ident podcast underway is an exceptional aviator and co-host. He is an award-winning trophy-hoisting tennis champion, a professional CFI, II, and MEI flight instructor, a former freight dog, a former airline pilot, a current King Air flight instructor, a Falcon 2000 commander, a captain, and a corporate operator as well. He joins us from his mobile studio from the third floor of the Courtyard Marriott Hotel, where he is sharing a short layover with us. From somewhere in Palm Beach, Florida, please help me in welcoming back to the show, Captain Roger. Captain, how you doing?
What day is it, Tony? Where am I? What time is it?
I have no idea.
Me? Well, that makes two of us. That's about sums up how I'm doing. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, man. You've been busy.
I've been ridiculously busy.
I think that, since our last show, you've been flying nonstop with just minimal days off in between, right?
Yeah, and when you're talking about minimal days off in a Part 91 operation, there is no minimum days off. It's been extremely busy for the past, month. Just a few days off here and there, but out and back, flying out, plane, staying behind, airlining back, picking up another airplane. It's been a continuous onslaught.
Yeah, well, that's good, right?
There are definitely good elements to that, and there are bad elements of that. I'm starting to forget where I live or what my kids look like. And like I say, I definitely have no idea what day it is.
Yeah.
And thank goodness, I wear my watch, and my watch will always tell me what day it is, because I genuinely I've lost track.
Yeah. Well, that's funny you say that, because I can remember from the beginning of this career that the days do run together sometimes, and especially because we don't have for the most part, a 9-to-5 job where you go in certain days of the week and you get up around the same time.
You're Monday through Friday. There's nothing that can distinguish one day from the next.
Yeah.
Or 1 week from the next.
And that's probably one of the hardest challenges in this aviation profession, is that you have to really get good with working a different clock than most people, having this challenge of the wackle, the window of circadian low. It's almost like a constant jet lag. I think most pilots and flight attendants alike, with the schedules, at least at the airline side of things, they get used to it really quick. That one day they're waking up at a certain time, the next day they're going to bed at that certain time that they were waking up the day before, and it really does have a toll on the human body, and getting kind of acclimated to that schedule is one of the hardest challenges, I think, once you're a professional pilot on the line. And regardless if you're flying for a private owner or a charter or cargo or what it is, you're always going to have these challenges because flying on a schedule or on demand, you're going to be flying in multiple time zones around the country, maybe even around the world. And that is a tough thing to get used to.
And like you said, it definitely does take its toll. I think for both of us, we're somewhat fortunate in the fact that we actually me more than you, but fly on the quote unquote front side of the clock. But that backside of the clock flying, for our cargo friends out there, who a lot of us aspire to, specifically at the two big cargo carriers. But there are some pretty sobering statistics on how that does affect you over the course of a lifetime of flying on the backside of the clock. We say we get used to it. I would say that I've gotten used to it, but our biology might tell a different story, towards the end of a career, unfortunately.
Yeah, I can remember in training when I was going through flight training and sitting there with a handful or dozens of my peers around the same level in terms of flying that I had. And we would always have these discussions about what we wanted to do, what we aspired to, what kind of operation that we aspired to fly. And a lot of people say, oh man, cargo all the way. And a lot of the arguments were usually surrounded around, well, when you retire, you're going to have a life expectancy of like 5 years post-retirement. That's it. That's all, because you're constantly flying in the dark on the backside of the clock, and the human body is just not meant for that. Versus a pilot that, say, has some seniority and gets to fly a more 9 to 5 front side of the clock, daytime, weekends off schedule, that they'll have a much longer lifespan. And as you mentioned, statistically, those were always numbers that were being thrown at us. And, I'd like to see some more research on that, because it kind of swayed my decision when I was just a aspiring pilot in my training phase of my career. Did that affect you, Roger, in terms of making a decision?
I don't think it really affected me that much. However, it's also a little, my career path, as we've talked about many times before, has been a little bit different. Mine has been a lot more jagged than yours. And so I'm kind of in a lot of ways always been looking to, okay, how can I make this better? Because I've jumped around a lot more, and the FedEx or the UPS of the world, that looks really good to somebody who's been furloughed, or that's 40 or 50 years in the future. Like, why worry about that now?
Yeah.
And so I think that it kind of just depends on your career path. Also, I did know a guy. Actually, I've known several guys, but one of them specifically from FedEx did quote me about that same number. He flat out said, the average amount of time that we pay out retirement benefits is 7 years. And there's only one reason that stops, unfortunately, because time does catch up.
Yeah.
Even when you're flying around at the speeds that we do.
Yeah. And I think there is truth to the fact that when you're flying the backside of the clock, it does have effect on the biology of a pilot. But at the same time, I also truly believe that as we age, it gets harder and harder to keep moving. And when you stop moving, you die. And that has been my philosophy for the longest time. I've seen my grandparents go through decline in their lives, where as they got older, they found their mobility to be more of a struggle. And as that became more of a struggle, as did their health.
Everything else.
So I truly believe that, if you keep moving, you'll be okay to the most part, or for the most part, I should say. And maybe that's why I never sit still.
Well, and that's part of, well, that's another discussion. Like, altogether. But for the normal people of us out there, what you were just talking about is definitely something that I think that aviators across the entire spectrum, need to be aware of, that we sit for long periods of a time. Yeah. We sit. Our job consists of sitting and really not moving, not really getting up. For people who are flying long haul stuff, you might sit for 5 to 15 hours straight. And the diet that we also, we've touched on that on this show before also, but you couple a sedentary lifestyle forced on you by a job with the much fewer options from a dietary standpoint, which are not always the most healthy just because of where we are able to get food.
Right.
And, you've got a little bit of an uphill battle in order to keep yourself healthy. That's for sure.
What did we call a pilot food when we were in the flight center? It was Ritz crackers and cheese crackers. It's like, well, that's pilot food. Anything out of the vending machine.
Yep. Anything out of a vending machine that's then packaged and chock full of stuff.
Preservatives and nitrites and all the good stuff that really sticks to your gut.
It mummifies your body. Preserves it really well.
That's right. Well,
it reminds me of that hamburger. Remember that was a few months ago, that person found that maybe 6 months ago, some person found a McDonald's hamburger or something that they had lost it for like 12 years. And it was still like, you could recognize it apparently.
Yeah.
Like how many preservatives were in this stuff.
I can remember a friend's kid was doing a science experiment for school, and they had to do that. They had to buy 2 McDonald's hamburgers or cheeseburgers and pull them apart and put them on a plate. And one was kept in the refrigerator and one was not. And they had to do their little research on it. And there was really no change between the 2 after weeks.
That's like what we eat, folks.
It's like a Twinkie. A Twinkie is like good through a nuclear holocaust, man.
Yep. Yep.
And that's really some advice that if I could give a young aviator that's out there, just starting to get into the industry, take care of yourself. It is a very sedentary job. I forget, what is it? After the age of 30 or 40, we lose like 2% muscle a year or something crazy like that. So get in that gym when you're on that layover. Go for a run, go for a walk even. It's very important, and make good choices with the food that you eat. It'll increase your mental acuity. It'll increase your energy rate. You won't have to drink 5 or 6 cups of coffee just to get past the day or through the day. So it's very important to have a good, healthy diet. And it's really hard to do sometimes with our schedules.
That kind of reminds me, I have a question for you that I was thinking about the other day that kind of goes along with the health aspect. Instead of eating, we'll talk about drinking, specifically water, not the drinking that every other pilot out there was thinking I was going to talk about here. Did you find, like, it's not so much of an issue with you now because you have a lab in the front of the airplane, but how much do you think that we dehydrated ourselves when we didn't want to take the walk of shame to the back of the Embraer 145 as regional pilots?
So
because I know I did.
Yeah, you actually would hold out and not drink so much?
Absolutely, because I didn't want to have to go and walk past 50 people to get to the lab in the back of the airplane. And, I didn't think about it so much at the time, but lately I was like, I tell myself, Roger, you got to drink more water, which I think is good. But even now I still find myself, which I do a good job at home, but on the other 25 days of the month, I think I'm pretty sure that I dehydrate myself on purpose as to avoid having to walk to the back of the airplane, because that's the only place where we have a lab on our, on our jet. You at least have one in the front, but
Roger, the only thing I'm going to say to you is shame on you. What would Kelly say right now? Kelly, and I hope you're listening, she would say, Roger, you have to drink more water. Kelly being...
There are 50 people on the way between me and the lab, though.
I've never been ashamed of the walk of shame. I know that, some of our listeners might go, what the heck are they talking about? So when you get your first job at a regional airline or at an operation where you're now flying on a schedule and you have passengers and, it's all exciting. Well, one of the first things that you'll learn out on the line is you want to try to avoid, especially on a regional jet where the only lab is usually in the back of the cabin, you want to try to avoid having to drink too much water right before a flight and then midway through the flight have to say, well, oh man, I got to go. I can't hold it any longer. And then they have to do the little swap with the flight attendant and the pilot, and the pilot has to walk to the back of the plane and pass every single passenger. And on an RJ, it's typically around 50 people that are now looking at you going, the pilot's out of the cockpit. Why is the pilot out of the cockpit? And then, of course, you'll hear at least 2 or 3 times, the cockpit's the other way. And, all the cliche jokes. Everybody's a freaking comedian, right? So I've never been ashamed of having to do that. I actually enjoyed it. Because then I could see, because when else are you going to see your passengers' faces? Because you're busy doing your pre-flight checks when they're boarding, and you're busy doing your post-flight checklists and getting your kit bag together when they're deplaning. So when are you really looking at the passengers? You're not. And so I wouldn't mind. Now, I had a kind of general rule. Well, I would not have iced tea or a big thing of like lemonade right before a flight or within an hour of a flight, because iced tea and lemonade do it to me every time. It's like, I'll have to go. There's no holding it. I have to go. Coffee, not so much, because so it's less liquid. But for me, I have like a 2-hour bladder. So even now, I drink a full, 1.5 liter bottle that they give you at the beginning of each flight. I'll drink. You
guys get?
Yeah, they'll usually a flight attendant will give you a trash bag and 2 bottles of water, 1 for each pilot. I will go through a bottle of water in a shift. So 5-6 hours of flying in a particular day.
Now, has that drinking habits changed now that you have a lab in the front of the airplane, or has it actually? Okay, so that was
yep. Because even though it's in the front, it's still a big ordeal, because now you have, usually you have the first class flight attendant, the purser, the number one. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the more senior flight attendant. It just means they're the one servicing the first class cabin and galley. And then you have 3 other flight attendants that are working in the back. At least that's the way it is in the configuration on a 320 and a 321. 319, there's only 2 in the back and 1 in the front. And I speak of this only because I'm familiar with it. So it's a big ordeal, because when a pilot has to come out of the cockpit, anyone who's traveled in the US in the last 10 years knows that there is an exchange where, there's a cart that comes out that blocks the aisle for security reasons. And then if a pilot leaves their station, then that has to be replaced with a flight attendant in the cockpit while the other pilot goes to the bathroom. Okay. So it's still a big deal. Now, you can't leave the first class galley unattended. So they have to call the back, have one of the flight attendants come up to the front, put the cart in place, figure out who's going to go into the flight deck and who's going to stay behind to monitor the situation. Then the pilots have to go out and, they do their thing. They come back, they go through their procedure. It's still a big deal. Even though
it is a dance.
It's a dance, right? And we try to coordinate it so that both pilots go at the same time, or in the same procedural time frame. That way you're not going, well, I need to go. And then, okay. And then the captain's, are you going to go? No, I'm not going to go. And then 30 minutes later, well, now I got to go. So it's kind of a big deal. I try to make it, if it's a 2-hour flight or more, I'll usually go at least one time. If it's like a 6-hour flight, which I've been on those, then I'll twice minimum. So like I said, about a 2-hour bladder. And the only reason for that is that I'm pretty good about drinking
properly, hydrating.
Yeah, water. Now I was concerned about a year ago, because I thought that maybe something might have been wrong, because I go almost every 2 hours, and a lot of the other pilots that I've flown with, they can hold it for 4 or 5 or 6 hour flight and not go. And I'm thinking, wow, that's pretty cool. Do I have a problem? Should I go get checked out? A lot of these pilots.
It's because the rest of us are dehydrating ourselves.
Exactly. Well, kidney stones and urinary stones are very painful. Let me tell you, they're very painful. I've not personally gone through that because I always stay well hydrated. But, I was telling my doctor, and my doctor goes, well, how much water do you drink in a day? And I kind of thought about it, and I said, well, I get my orange juice in the morning and my coffee. And I went through the whole thing. He goes, son, you drink about 6 times more than the average person your age. He goes, that's great. He goes, maybe cut back on the coffee but keep up with the water. He goes, but if people that don't urinate as often as you, it's because they're not drinking enough water. They're not drinking enough fluids. So it's okay. I don't mind the walk of shame, Roger.
I was just wondering, apparently maybe it was, just me trying to, sacrificing my health for walking past those poor 50 people with the seatbelt sign on, wondering why they cannot get up, but why their pilot is.
Yeah. Well, if you're thinking about, doing the dance in your seat on final, and now they'll say, go into holding and 30 minutes. And you're like, what the? And that's not a good time to go use the restroom.
The worst time was, I remember flying into Denver International. It was terrible. And all I can remember is, thank goodness we were coming from the east. Thank goodness we landed on runway 8.
Oh,
or sorry. No, 26. Sorry, runway 2, was it 26?
26, yeah.
Coming from the east, and we got runway 26, and we landed straight in. It was it was terrible. I still remember it, where we were. Anyway, welcome to the Squawk Ident podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Hear about Captain Tony and his guests talking about their urinary habits.
Everyone has a story to tell in this regard. And you just reminded me, when I was flying at Pan Am Flight Academy, getting my training underway, after my instrument rating, I had to build time to have enough time under my belt for commercial. So what they did was, the program was a Part 141 program. They would have pilots either very early in the morning or kind of late at night do an out and back from the Phoenix area to some point in California and back to build time. And they had the pilots with a safety pilot under the hood. So one pilot would be flying under the hood so that they could log instrument training or instrument flight. And the safety pilot would be there and logging PIC, multi-engine. So pretty cool way to build time, and perfectly legal way to do it for the school. Well, I can remember one day we were going to Camarillo, California, from Deer Valley to Camarillo, California. It's a relatively long flight. And I didn't really think much of it, but I had a Gatorade with me, and I was drinking Gatorade in a PA, 42 or something like that. PA 40, one of those, a Seminole. And here I am, and somewhere around the border, I had to go, but I didn't want to have to divert. We were under, instrument flight following and instrument flight rules. I wanted to be able to log the time and not have to call ATC and say, yeah, we're going to change our flight plan. So
now the border, everybody, is at best halfway between Phoenix and Camarillo. At best.
At best. And
to carry on with the story.
And so by the time we got to the airspace, we call the control tower, my co-pilot is cracking up laughing. He's in hysterics laughing at me. And he's like, just go in the bottle, man. Just go in the bottle. And I'm like, oh, I can hold it. I can hold it. I was stubborn, So we came in. I must have landed well above the approach speed. We used up the runway. I told him, we're going to taxi. We need immediate to the FBO. And so shut down the engine. I'm like, you're on the checklist. I opened the door and I'm running across the ramp. And I notice a bunch of people on this beautiful outdoor patio restaurant. And they're just seeing this pilot just running into the FBO. Oh my God. One of those moments is, Should belong in a film.
But you made it.
I made it, and I didn't have an accident.
Or that's the story that you're sticking to.
No, it's true. But I learned early on. It's not worth it. It's not worth. My kidneys were hurting. My back was hurting. I mean, I was in pain. It was not good. So let's talk about the little John. No. Wow. These are stories from the flight line, ladies and gentlemen. Stories from the flight line.
What it's like to be a pilot. You have to cover the pros and the cons.
Yeah. Yeah, you really do. I mean, and if that gets one pilot out there, that story to, make sure they hydrate, but also, if you need a break, take a break. Take the walk of shame. Don't be ashamed of that. I mean, what other opportunity are you going to get a chance to walk past the passengers and hear these corny one-liners? Shouldn't you be in the front? Hey, it's all good.
And even in a smaller airplane, it wasn't that long ago. It was maybe a month or two ago where there was a smaller plane that called up on, that must have been a center frequency for a diversion. And the air traffic control will always ask you, what's the reason for the diversion? And biological needs.
Yeah.
And that was just probably 2 months ago, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, we're human.
Yeah.
Now, not to say that you should drink a freaking extra large sweet
Mountain
iced
Dew.
tea right before you get on a flight deck, But, plan accordingly. Definitely hydrate. Well, this week I returned to the flight line after 3.5 weeks off. Talk about getting it done. We kind of mentioned this in the last show as well, that I was having time off and, we got to do some remodel work at your place. And I've been going steady, remodeled quite a bit here at the house. And my latest project was to refinish a desk. So here we went out and bought this antique desk and we sanded it down and restained it and varnished it. And, it came out really nice, but there's another 3-day project on top of getting the bathroom done, which up until about an hour and 30 minutes ago, I was still working on it. But now it's finally mostly complete with a couple little odds and ends that need to be completed. But yeah, so getting a lot done here. At the same time, I did have a trip last week, and I was really looking forward to it. It was a 4-day trip with a Phoenix layover and a Lahui, Hawaii layover. And I hadn't been to Hawaii in quite some time, so I thought, hey, talk about great way to come back. Well, the day before the trip, the Lahui layover canceled. They're still not out of the whole quarantine thing, especially in Hawaii. And so because the demand is low, they elected to cancel the flight over here at Legacy Airlines. Well, what that ended up doing is it put me in what's called recovery obligation, or RO. So I received a phone call. It was actually on my last day of vacation, and it was from crew scheduling. Well, any wise pilot will tell you, if you're on vacation, don't answer your phone. Let it go to voicemail. And I figured it was something to this effect, that they were telling me about a schedule change, because I'm not on reserve. So there's no reason really to call me. And sure enough, when I listened to the message, they had told me that the Lahui portion of the sequence had canceled, but I was under recovery obligation. So what I ended up doing was a 3-legger on Thursday, the 4th. It was an LA to Cabo San Lucas, return leg, and then 1 leg to Phoenix. And it was a relatively long day. My departure time was around 11 in the morning. I got to fly a brand new 321 Neo. And so talk about coming back right into a new aircraft. When I did the walk around, I noticed that there was not a lick of like dirty anything. Even the wheels, the wheel center covers, no brake dust on it. I thought, man, this thing must be new. So when I got back onto the flight deck, I told the captain, man, this has to be a very, very low time aircraft. I bet you there's less than 100 hours. And he goes, oh, I wonder how you can check. I said, well, I actually know. So I went into our app that Legacy Airlines has, and I looked up 50 hours total time on the airframe. And we got to fly it. And let me tell you, it was really nice to have that new airplane smell. And it also put a little bit of pressure on me too, because I mean, you're flying a brand new airplane, every little thing. It's like, okay, if anything goes wrong, it's a brand new airplane, not that that's a major deal, but it was nice to fly down there and back in that. Then we did an aircraft swap, ended up in Phoenix, short layover, stayed at one of the hotels by the airport. Next day, returned back to LA. And now normally I would have returned to LA, had an aircraft swap, had to go and get some paperwork for my flight planning to go into Hawaii, but it got canceled. They didn't reassign me, so I got to go home. And I was still under obligation the next day, which was Sunday, but again, they didn't call me. They didn't have anything for me, and I really don't think they could with the time off that I had. So I got an extra couple days off at home with pay, which is nice. And that's one of the benefits of flying the line for a legacy carrier. When you guys cancel flights and have changes to the owner's schedule, is there any kind of protection, or how is it that your pay works when you fly private?
Well, it kind of just depends on the structure of your operation. Typically, you're on salary, and you're this is your salary, and you're beholden to whatever the schedule might be. Just because you cancel doesn't mean anything. It doesn't change anything in terms of pay. If you get a last minute pop-up trip, that doesn't affect your pay either. You're kind of just, that's the nature of the beast. Now, so that can work to your advantage or to not, if it's a busy month, and obviously, your daily or hourly pay is much less, but then there's also months where you might not fly as much, in which case your daily or your hourly rate would be a whole lot more.
Yeah.
There's also other structures, in which case you might be a contract pilot, in which case you generally charge on a daily basis or a daily rate, and you're going to only get paid if you actually show up and work. Now, that can also work to your benefit or to not, to your detriment, because if you're not flying, then you get no paycheck. If you're flying a lot, then that's a whole lot better. And depending on how high up you are, cancellations will work a different way. Sometimes you might, if you're on contract, there's usually some kind of contract between, who's hiring you and yourself. And depending on what the time frame of that cancellation is, some people are able to charge for that. Mm-hmm. But that's kind of an agreement between the contract pilot and the owner or whoever's hiring those services out. So it just depends. But generally, cancellations are that we don't have pay protection or anything like that around here. We don't have unions. Most of the time, it's a salary basis, and you're just
Well, I know
go when they tell you to.
The charter operators, like the 135s, they usually have like a 2-week on, 2-week off availability, where it's kind of in their contract. I think NetJets is that way, and some of the other 135 operators.
Yeah, typically they're like a week on, or some are eight on, 6 off. But those guys, again, typically that's a salary basis. And when you are on your 8 on or your 7 on, it doesn't matter whether you fly every single day or you don't fly at all, which would never be the case in those operators. Otherwise, they'd go out of business, obviously. But whether the flight cancels or not, you're still on call. You're going to be out at a hotel, or a lot of times those guys are just sitting around at airports also.
Yeah. Yeah. And, pilots and sit time. Yep. Get used to it.
There's a lot of it.
Yeah. So, Roger, you've been flying quite a bit in this past week. I just did that quick trip and a couple days off. I returned back to a pretty heavy schedule starting tomorrow morning. I'm flying with a friend, of the podcast, and hopefully we'll see if our schedules allow it. Maybe we can record a little bit of something while we're on the road. Hopefully that'll work out. But it's going to be fun to fly a trip here. I've got one coming up tomorrow morning that goes through, looks like Charlotte and Detroit, and then laying over in Detroit, and then going over to, where's MCO? Orlando?
Orlando.
Yeah, so a little Orlando layover, and then through Dallas and back to Los Angeles on day 3. So that's going to work out. And then I've got one day off, and then I got the same trip 3 more times. Not that trip, though. It's a trip that goes through Las Vegas and then Honolulu for a long Honolulu. Now, we were talking at the onset of this episode about flying the backside of the clock. Sometimes when you're in a particular seniority at a company, the best you're going to do, if you're really shooting for a layover of a certain type, the best you're going to do is have some kind of backside of the clock flying in that sequence. That's exactly what I got. So on day 3 at 10:30 p.m., I depart Honolulu, red eye back to Los Angeles, and land at 7 in the morning. So I'm going to be starting early in the morning on day 1, and then finishing flying at the end of the day, relatively decent time, and then getting up late, having a PM flight into Honolulu that lands in, somewhere in the evening, and then spending the entire day there on day 3, leaving at the end of day 3 to land back at base at the beginning of day 4. Those are tough because, like what we talked about, you don't really get acclimated to your time because you're flying, you're awake at one point, and then a day later you're supposed to be sleeping at that time, and the day after that you're supposed to be getting up to get ready to go. So those are tough on the body, and I do that trip 3 times in the month. So it's going to be a tough one for me.
Yeah, because then, that day that you get back is kind of shot too, because you're trying to recover, and now you're looking at 2 days, the day of and the day after, that are just kind of you're in la la land because you're not sure what time you should treat it as.
Yeah,
and then to get 3 times back to back in a month.
Yeah. But hey, it's going to be a lot of naps for this old man.
The big legacy airlines pilots.
And you said you've been doing a lot of flights into Truckee this past few weeks. What's going on there? Does your owner have a cool vacation spot there in Tahoe?
Pretty much, yep.
So the skiing is good.
There's a couple of houses up there, and yep, we're going back and forth to Truckee a fair amount, into the clouds and into the snow and into the mountains, and just a lot of out and backs in and out of Truckee over the last couple months, really.
Yeah. Now
it's a common destination for us.
Yeah, on the last show we were talking about how you're doing circle to land approaches versus straight ins and weather phenomena that could dictate why you would want to do a circle to land. Sometimes it's better to do a straight in, but people elect to do a circle to land for maybe wind direction or whatnot. Did you deal with any of that this week as well?
Fortunately, I didn't have to deal with any circling per se. I did go to Truckee a couple days ago. We shot an approach and landed straight in on the short runway again. That was kind of what we talked about, I think, on the last episode, electing to not circle and landing on the shorter runway instead of circling, because I think that's just a better option most of the time. There is an approach that we have into one of our home airports, however, that is kind of a circling approach. However, the strange thing about that is a lot of people don't actually know that it's a circling approach, which always kind of gives me a little bit of kick, both from mostly because I used it for training purposes also, and people it's still kind of amazes me how people are going to go shoot an approach and they really have absolutely no idea what the approach even means from the beginning, and it can create a lot of problems.
So which approach is this that you're talking about?
We have an approach into Gillespie, which is the localizer delta approach.
And what does that mean? Delta, does that mean displaced? Or
what does that mean?
Yeah, that's a great question.
So if we're talking, a lot of people, this is where I make fun of our airline guys, and I know that we have a lot of airline pilots that are out there. Do you know what a localizer delta approach is? That's the name of the approach.
Is it like a DME thing?
It's not a DME thing. So a lot of people, kind of when we initially do our instrument training and we do circling approaches back when we're a little bit wiser in that, at least in that particular aspect of instrument flying, but like a VOR alpha approach is something that people have typically heard of. And a VOR alpha approach, we'll ask our own Captain Tony, since he's the only participant here with us today. But what is a VOR alpha approach?
I don't know. It's the alpha. It's like saying the ILS Yankee and the ILS Zulu. I don't know. There are two of them. They're different. Which one are we doing? I don't know.
So anytime that you have an approach with alpha, what does it go up to? I think maybe up to Foxtrot. But anytime you have an approach that's labeled then with a phonetic letter after it, is a circling approach. That's what it means from the get-go. If I tell you that it's a VOR alpha approach or VOR Bravo approach or a localizer delta approach, it is a circling approach. That's what before even getting past the title of your approach, it is a circling approach. Even if you go down to the minimums, you're going to see that there's only circling minimums. And the reason is because it's only a circling approach. And so the next question becomes, why is the approach a circling approach? Captain Tony.
Well, circling approach, it means that the localizer is more than 30 degrees offset from the runway center line.
And so this is where, to all of our listeners, we can then laugh at our airline pilot here and ask him when the last time there was a localizer that was not lined up straight on with the runway. There kind of is a correct answer here, but that's called an LDA, a localizer.
An LDA, yeah. Localizer, as John and Martha King would say, a localizer darn angle approach.
Correct, because it is not lined up. However, this is a localizer delta approach. A localizer is always lined up straight with the runway because it's part of an ILS. An ILS is made up of two components, a localizer
and a glide
slope.
Okay.
So why in the world, why would we have a localizer?
Now I got to go back 20 years to my training. And if I'm going to draw from what I recall, if you're at an airport where they may have a localizer frequency transmitter for one runway, but only that runway, and if there's a second runway that maybe doesn't have a frequency or a transmitter for that runway, then they would label the VOR alpha for the runway without that frequency. So the approach would then manipulate the equipment from one runway to land on another runway, and they would call it as such. Is that anywhere close to what you're looking for here?
No, it is not. but we give you points for effort, and A for effort here.
So how about descent gradients? Is that anything to do with that?
Now we are starting to get somewhere.
So anything more than 400 nautical miles from the final approach fix to
400 nautical miles.
400 feet per nautical mile.
So that's correct. If anything more than 4 degree glide slope, because what's going to happen is there's two reasons that we have a circling approach. The first of which is what you started talking about, our localizer that was not lined up with the runway. Okay. But anytime that we have an approach course, a final approach course, this is outside of 30 degrees, outside the runway orientation, it's considered a circling approach. But that's where 95% of the pilots will stop. They think that, hey, it's a circling approach and it's because it's not lined up. Well, in this particular scenario, because this is an airport that I go into on an almost daily basis, we have a localizer. It's lined straight up with the runway, but it's a localizer delta approach. It's circling. And the reason for that is because of terrain. The second reason that you can have a circling approach is because part of one of the things that we need in order to land from an instrument approach per Part 91 of the FARs is that we need to use normal maneuvers, leaving the MDA or just DA, use normal maneuvers in order to accomplish the landing. But if the terrain, the rising terrain from the direction that we're coming doesn't allow you to use a normal descent rate, you have to circle. You're going to have to come out an MDA, but you're going to be too high over the top of the airport to actually land straight in which case, if you can't land straight in because you're too high, you have to circle for the runway. And that's why this particular airport at Gillespie is a localizer delta, is because it's, I think, about a 6.9 degree final descent angle, which is well outside of the 4 degrees. And that's why it's an actual circling approach.
So is that Rattlesnake Hill or whatever?
The Rattlesnake Hill is part of it. However, it's also even going out to the east. Rattlesnake Hill, you actually have to have visual. That one is, you have to have that in sight in order to land because you're really close to it. Yeah. But it's the rising terrain out to the east because of the topography and the geography around the area of San Diego and the rising terrain close to the east side of the city. Okay. So a localizer delta means that it is only a circle to land approach because the MDA is way too high to make a normal approach to landing. Correct. We have a localizer being our ground directional aid, but we can only circle. And that the reason for that is because of the terrain and the MDA and the descent rate. Excellent. You know, I know it's back there somewhere in the in the encyclopedia of knowledge, but man, it's been a long time since I even thought about that. You see all the stuff that the GA pilots of America have to put up with that you guys don't ever even think about? Yeah, it's very, very true. You know, and my hat's off to the GA pilots, the charter pilots. I mean, we were just talking about this a couple episodes ago. It's like, man, I don't think I could do your job. I mean, you're on the phone constantly. You're doing everything from getting catering on the aircraft, making sure that the maintenance logbooks have been signed off and the flight plan was filed and the weather checks have been good, and you're doing it all. You know, we have what's called SOC for that, or MOC. Maintenance operation control or systems operation control. You know, we have, rooms full of people with, teams of computers all there waiting for doing us all to your just show up for you. All we got to do is show up. Well, the paperwork says I need this much fuel to take off. So that's how much fuel I'm going to have to take off. And well, why is that? I don't know. And I don't care. That's what the paperwork says. That's what dispatch told me I needed. And that's good enough for me. And when you're flying at especially maybe not so much at a regional airline or commuter airline, but when you're flying at a major airline, what are you doing 99% of the time? A full ILS. Daytime, nighttime, IFR, VFR, you're shooting an ILS. Occasionally, you're going into international destinations, you're going to shoot a GPS approach. In which case, it's a coupled autopilot GPS approach because the company prefers that you do it that way. If the weather is low, what are you doing? A Cat 3 auto land. What does that mean? That means the one or both or all three of the autopilots, depending on your equipment, are coupled to the ILS and the plane is landing all by itself. All the captain and the first officer are doing are monitoring systems, making required callouts. And once the aircraft is on the runway, then it'll apply the brakes automatically. And when it gets to a certain speed, there's a speed call out. I believe 80 knots is the right call. And all of a sudden, the autopilot click, click, click comes off and the captain resumes control of manipulating the aircraft on the ground. And that's what we do. So occasionally, some young hotshot GA pilot or private or corporate pilot will come in and go, "You airline guys, let's hear what's the definition of this." And we're like, I don't know. But it gives the rest of us entertainment value because, as you know, you airline guys, legacy air, you have made it. You are the man. You work at Legacy Airline. And so we like to, or I speak on probably just my behalf, but I like to I like to give you a hard time.
Yeah, you've been giving me a hard time for 20 years, my friend.
But I'd like to say thank you for indulging me and making fun of you just a little bit and hyping that up a little bit more than I even had to.
No, but I appreciate that. This is what we're here. This is what the Squawk Ident podcast is all about. Yes, primarily we discuss about, the journey in today's aviator. And when we can get interviews lined up, we definitely love hearing about everyone's unique journey and how they became the pilot that they are today. But in that process, we also talk about all of the hurdles that come along the way in this journey. And thank you so much for bringing this up, because, I've seen occasionally we give, VOR alphas in the book. We rarely ever have to perform them. Even in training, we don't really do much more than we usually do an ILS with the glide slope out of service. So it's a localizer only approach. We do a GPS approach or two. We do an ILS approach or two, and a couple single engine approaches, precision and non-precision. Occasionally we do a VOR into JFK. At least that's what the Legacy likes to do. And which has these really cool lead-in lights and all the fun stuff.
VOR-13 left.
Exactly. Which has that been decommissioned?
I don't know. I just know that the VOR-13 left is something, JFK is something that all kinds of training departments have been using for decades.
Yep. And I got to say, one of the highlights of being based in New York for the time that I was there, when I was at Sandpiper, used to love shooting that approach, at a home airport. And that in the expressway visual in LaGuardia. Oh, that one's a good one. Do you have the tanks in sight? What? The tanks. Do you have the tanks? What are they talking about? Take a look at the expressway visual runway. What is it in LaGuardia? 29?
I don't remember. I remember doing one visual approach into LaGuardia, and yeah, it's like you fly. Like I didn't fly into there all that much, and it was at nighttime, and I'm trying to find all of these visual cues to look for, and LaGuardia is not the easiest airport to land at either.
No.
You're coming in and it's kind of out on the water, which is dark, and you're looking for all these visual cues as you come in, and the runway is not all that long either.
No, it's the expressway visual runway 31 into LaGuardia. In terms of the runway 31 is, what is it? 7,003 feet of runway available. Let's see here.
Maybe it was one of them had you turn like base to final inside of 2 miles or something.
Yes, that's the one.
No, maybe so. That was it. And you have to be configured like on downwind because you're so tight coming into this runway.
Yeah. And I used to love that one. I think that one absolutely is my favorite. So when you're coming in on this chart, it's the 19-2 chart. If you're following along on Jeppeson's, the expressway visual runway 31, and you come in over Prospect Park, and you have to visually head over to Dials, or you can go, usually even under instrument conditions, you can go to Dials intersection. But you have to have the tanks in sight before they can clear you on this visual approach procedure. Now, when you look on the chart, it just says twin white tanks, and you think, how am I going to see twin white tanks out here? Well, they're huge propane or natural gas tanks. There are 2 of them. And they're huge, and you can't miss them. So as soon as you have the tanks in sight, they'll say, do you have the tanks in sight? You say, yes, I do. All right, you're clear the expressway visual runway 31 contact tower. So here you are, you head over to the tanks, you make a little bit of a right turn, you follow the expressway, the Long Island Expressway, you go around Citi Field.
I remember that part.
Yep. You don't want to go over it.
Got
to go around the stadium. And as you're turning from base to final, which is more than a 90-degree turn, by the way, so you should be fully configured, as slow as practical, and at an altitude that would be commensurate with a standard 3-degree glide path to the runway, because at that point, you're committed. If you're overshoot, undershoot, you're too high, you're too low, you're probably going to go around because you're low. And you turn that
modified base to final, and you were right there. You're right there, and
you're on top of the runway.
So especially if there was a windy day and the winds were coming out of the south, you really had to bank it pretty good, get all lined up. And as soon as you turn final, what's right there? Part of the city dump where the birds are, seagulls are everywhere. So now you're like, final landing, birds. It could be a challenge. But 7,000 foot runways at LaGuardia, both intersecting runways. And on one of the runways, you land on an elevated portion of the runway that's a pier out into the water. And that's always fun. Runway, was it 2-1? 2-2. So, good times. We'll be right back right after the break. I want to take this time to say congratulations to one of our friends here at the Squawk Ident podcast, Mr. Kyle Jansen. Congratulations on the new addition to your family. Well, today's a relatively short show for us. Rob couldn't make it. He's actually been delayed on his flight out of Miami. He thought he was going to be able to get home on time for this broadcast today of this episode or this recording. And he was delayed and he just couldn't make it. He had a mechanical issue with his aircraft. So he sends his regards. And I was speaking with him just the other day in reference to what our schedules are going to be like here in the next few weeks. So if we can get some more shows out. And he's got some vacation coming up. Well, his vacation is going to be a nice family vacation in Hawaii. And as mentioned earlier, I'm going to be going to Honolulu quite a bit, 3 more times actually this month. And hopefully we can meet up. Now, there are some restrictions still for flight crews in Hawaii. Part of the process, you have to go online to the Department of Transportation for Hawaii, and you have to register the fact that you're flying in, even flight crews. And what happens is they send you an email with a QR code. As soon as you land, there is a National Guard waiting for you at the top of the jet bridge, and they check your temperature and hand you a questionnaire. If everything on there, you have a fever, have you been exposed, all those things. As long as there's no to everything, then you move forward to the next process where there are agents there with digital laptop or digital tablets. And what they want to do is scan your QR code that you've registered with the Department of Transportation of Hawaii, allowing you for them to know where you're going so that if you have to quarantine, they'll know they can check on you and whatnot. Flight crews are exempt from the 14-day or whatever it is quarantine. However, you're still under a restriction, a quarantine restriction. So you're not allowed to leave your hotel unless it's for physical exercise by yourself or to get food to bring back to your hotel and you eat it at your hotel. You can't go on the beach. You can't participate in any water activities. You can't rent a car. There's a lot of things that you just can't do. You are basically have to isolate yourself for your entire stay there. The only way around that is, and I'll have to check to see if I have the most updated information, is the only way around that is if you take a COVID test. And I don't know if it's 48 hours or 72 hours prior to your trip, and it comes back with results that are negative, then you are exempt as a flight crew member or even a traveler to quarantine in your hotel. You can then participate, go out and do what you got to do because you've had a negative test. Now, I was thinking about that, and I'm hopefully going to be able to meet up with Rob and his family and get some cup of coffee and say hello in person, which will be nice. But I can't really do that if I'm under a quarantine. So I think what I'm going to do is go out, get myself a COVID test. And as long as it comes back negative, then when I get to Hawaii, I have a proof that I have a negative test within the time frame that they require, and I am no longer restricted to be quarantined.
I will caution you on that. This is from another one of my coworkers who actually went to Hawaii as a crew member.
Yes.
And so this is secondhand information.
Okay.
But I do believe from what he was saying that there are only certain testing facilities that are approved by the state of Hawaii. So for you or anybody else that might be traveling to Hawaii, double check that information, because like I said, that's secondhand information. But from what he had told me, the state of Hawaii will only allow COVID tests from certain facilities. I do not know what the criteria are, but
that is true. I remember receiving that information as well, that you can't just go to any place to get tested, that it has to be at an approved site. And there is a list. You can go to travel.hawaii.gov to get more information about that. So if you're planning a trip to the islands, before you go, make sure you know. And that, again, is travel.hawaii.gov.
I think a lot of airports now have facilities in close proximity to airports for this reason, for people who are traveling internationally, whether it be to the Caribbean, which also has rules just like the state of Hawaii. And that I did have personal experience with. And also with the new directive from January, I think it was, in international destinations, hotels in Mexico, I know, are setting up COVID testing, because in order to get back into the States now, you need to have that testing. And so in order to drum up business, businesses are figuring out, what can we do to get people traveling again?
Yeah. Mexico was like that. If you lay over as a traveler in any of the Mexican destinations, before you can get on a plane to come back, you have to be tested, have a negative test. And if you end up coming up positive, then at your expense, you have to stay at one of their designated hotel areas. Yes, as you mentioned, I'm looking at the Hawaii website here, the travel, and it does say that if you're going to get tested, it has to be at Hawaii's trusted testing and travel partners. And you can find that on their website as well at hawaiicovid19.com/travel-partners/. Well, that's going to pretty much wrap up episode 72 of the Squawk Ident podcast. We hope that all of you out there in podcast land are enjoying the value that you're receiving from our little show. We really do enjoy sitting down every week and discussing this amazing journey in aviation. And I really want to say thank you to our co-host, Captain Roger, for sitting down with us to record this episode while he's on a relatively short layover in Palm Beach, Florida. I know your time is critical, and rest and hydration is key. So please,
absolutely,
accept my special thanks to you for doing this, and for doing this every week. We really do have a wonderful time talking about and discussing all these technical aspects of the job, the funny stories that come along with it, the walks of shame and whatnot. And I just want to say thank you to you.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's a pleasure to be here, and I thank you to you and our listeners for allowing me to keep this one a little shorter so that I can get some rest before waking up. Waking up and doing it again tomorrow.
Yeah, and be safe out there, Roger. I mean, it's some crazy stuff.
Always.
With all the stuff that you have to deal with on a daily basis. I mean, we don't even print out paperwork anymore. It's all on a tablet. We push buttons.
Well, that's one thing that doesn't change no matter what, no matter what kind of operation you're in, is that safety does need to come first.
Absolutely.
And that doesn't change no matter what kind of airplane you're flying or what kind of operation you're flying it in.
Yep. Always think of that. Put the safety of aviation first, and the rest will come. If you find value in our podcast and would like to help us continue to grow, we encourage you to visit our website at aviatortony.com. That's Alpha, Victor, the number 8, Romeo, Tango, Oscar, November, Yankee.com. From the homepage, you can find methods to contribute to our show by becoming a producer with either a one-time or recurring contribution. You can also leave us audio feedback. You can ask questions. You can discuss show topics, show topic discussions, send us emails, all there on the website. Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube users can find us under the Squawk Ident podcast. We encourage you to support us on the YouTube channel with a like, subscribe, and a share. In closing, I'd like to say thank you so much for taking the time to listen to these grateful aviators. Keep the dirty side down out there. Be safe, drink plenty of water, and take care of each other. Bye, y'all.
Stay hydrated, my friend.